10 years ago, it wasn't unusual for people to be invited up to the cockpit. Of course, since 9/11, it's become a lot tighter, and you will find cockpit doors are locked generally throughout the flight.
Every country sets its own rules as to who has the authority or the access to the cockpit. In some countries, it's up to the captain, so the captain can invite guests up to the cockpit. But to have them actually manipulating the controls of an airplane, regardless of whether they have people on it or not, the fact that this was allowed to occur is definitely an exception in the industry.
Dad, can I go back to my seat?
The two investigators are stunned by what they hear on the cockpit voice recorder.
It's unbelievable. These two youngsters, the ones who we couldn't identify, they were not thrown into the cockpit by the crash. They were his kids.
And they were flying the plane.
The investigators are speechless. How could three experienced pilots allow children to fly a commercial airliner? They're about to learn something even worse. The children are only part of the problem. A little-known feature of the plane proved deadly.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Turning to the left. The other way. The other way. To the left, now to the right. The other way. I am turning it left. Okay, get out.
Get out. Get out. Get out. Come on. Get out. Get out. Get to the left. The ground is right there.
Russian investigators listen to the cockpit voice recorder of an AeroFlot Airbus that has crashed in Siberia. What they hear makes their blood run cold.
Full throttle. Got it. Got full throttle. Full throttle. No.
You should understand the frame of mind of the father. He is very proud of what he's doing. He invites his kids into the cockpit. Strictly speaking, it's a violation, of course. But I know such violations do occur in real life. I'm not condemning him or defending him here. What I'm trying to say is that no disaster occurs for just any single reason. There's always more than one, all coming together.
But this time, it really does look like a single cause, a child flying the plane. And it sends shockwaves through AeroFlot's higher echelons.
No, I think it would benefit them.
Investigators feel the pressure. The media has learned that Eldar was at the controls. AeroFlot, trying to polish its Soviet-era image, wants to minimize the damage. Boris Rybak is an aerospace consultant in Moscow.
AeroFlot managers and executives indeed try to conceal results and try to downplay importance of this accident because it was very embarrassing.
Managers at AeroFlot aren't the only ones following the investigation. Airbus, the company who made the plane, is also intensely interested.
Ivan Efremovich, what's wrong?
Nothing.
If the accident was caused by Eldar, it will vindicate Airbus. At the same time, grieving families are also clamoring for answers.
Are you sure?
For Mishkivsky and his team, it is a delicate balance.
There is always more than one reason for a plane to crash. And we must find it.
I'll do my best.
His reputation, the reputation of Airbus, as well as AeroFlot, all now depends on finding this other cause.
This was an international flight. It was a Western-built aircraft, and it was inevitable that the investigation that would be conducted by the authorities and the inquiries that would be conducted by claimant lawyers would expose information.
At the same time, manufacturer of the aircraft, Airbus industry, was very keen to get as much realistic explanation of what happened because the reputation of this aircraft was at stake.
What I objected to was the way we was treated by AeroFlot after the accident. They wouldn't tell us anything what was going on. They denied everything. I wanted to know why my son died. I wanted to know why these men had been allowed to do such a thing. But all we got from AeroFlot was blank, blank, blank. Every time we tried to find something out, they just didn't want to know.
Families aren't the only ones desperate for answers. Vladimir Burakov continues trying to learn all he can about why the Airbus fell out of the sky. By analyzing information from the flight data recorder, he can trace and repeat every command given to the aircraft during the flight.
We were trying to get as close to the truth as possible, to find the cause, because that was the precedent, the first foreign-produced plane to crash while flying for a Russian airline.
The investigation confirms the autopilot was on when the plane got into trouble. Even with the children in the cockpit, the plane should have flown on course. What went so terribly wrong?
So, any new developments?
We can discount Kudrynsky's daughter. She sat in the chair, but she didn't fly the plane. At 17:47 and 6 seconds, Captain Kudrynsky tells her not to touch the autopilot switch.
Her father gave the autopilot the command to turn, while Yana just rested her hands lightly on the controls.
It was you. You turned the plane.
But when Eldar took the controls, Burakov discovers that something dramatically different happened. No one could possibly have guessed, not even the three pilots in the cockpit. Burakov may have found the key to the puzzle. The plane's flight data recorder shows that 2.5 minutes before the crash, while Eldar was at the controls, the autopilot partially disconnects. This is the start of all of the plane's troubles. But how did that happen? The autopilot is a sophisticated computer which manages an airplane's speed, altitude, and heading. Altitude and heading are controlled by three key functions. The rudder, which controls sideways movement, the elevators, which control vertical movement, and the ailerons, which are for turning. On Flight 593, the autopilot had disconnected itself from the ailerons.
And the autopilots that were used in transport airplanes years ago were an on-off. In today's sophisticated flight management systems, you can literally take fragments of the autopilot and disengage them, but not necessarily turn the switch off and turn it all off, unless you want to.
The question that really worries accident investigator Burakov is how did the autopilot become partially disconnected? There's no mention of it in the cockpit voice recordings. If this is a fault with the aircraft, it could prove fatal for future flights. The only way to know for certain is to reconstruct the accident on a flight simulator at Airbus Industries headquarters in Toulouse, France. Burakov's experience as a test pilot and his detailed knowledge of the A310 are crucial to the investigation. Using information from the flight data recorder, Burakov reconstructs the events, beginning at the moment Captain Kudrynsky allows his son to sit at the controls. A co-pilot will replicate Piskarev's actions.
Look out to the left, watching for the ground when we're turning.
Unlike his sister, Eldar turns the wheel before his father can tell the autopilot to turn the plane. The controls are stiff because he is fighting the autopilot. In the simulator, Burakov replicates Eldar's every movement.
No. It's starting to go. Going. Going. There. Hold it long enough and it disconnects.
How long?
30 seconds. And it disconnects smoothly.
No warning.
No.
No one in the cockpit knows it, but this is a critical moment. Eldar's resistance actually turns part of the autopilot off. It takes just half a minute, but from here on, Eldar is controlling the ailerons. Eldar is actually steering the plane.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Yes, it is.
What seemed like an open and shut case is suddenly much more complex.
To the left! The back!
The 15-year-old flying the plane isn't the only reason they crashed.
I have full throttle.
The discovery highlights a dangerous flaw in how pilots are trained on the A310.
I got it. I have full throttle.